So we're going to continue really working on career education. I think if you look at what we've done with everything from truck driving to mechanics, aviation, HVAC, electrical, we've had a huge increase in apprenticeships in the state of Florida over the last couple years, and we're really rocketing up the charts in terms of career education. Now, the cyber is, I think, unique because there's some that do require really significant higher education, but there's also some skills that we can really be implanting in middle and high school, so we're going to look to do that. So this is a really good investment, and I'm happy that we're going to be able to do it. And as I said, I think in the legislative session, I think you're going to see more initiatives taken with respect to cyber, and I think we'll be able to have some more to be able to talk about. Just in response, I watched most of the State of the Union. I did fall asleep during it, I confess. But I got 3 kids, 5 and under, so a lot of times by the time it gets past 9, we're a little tired. But the striking thing is we've got a lot of problems in this country, and that's obviously something you got to deal with. But it's striking that so many of these problems have been created by Biden and his administration since he's become president. I mean, think about gas. People are chafing at the pump because you've had 40–50% increase in the price of gas. Well, why is that? Because they shut down the Keystone Pipeline, said no oil from Anwar, nothing in federal lands. So consequently, you're importing more from countries like Russia. So that's bad for consumers because they're paying higher, but then it's also bad for our national security because that's effectively the fuel that is giving Putin the ability to do what he's doing. So we were energy independent, and we should be energy independent, and we would be energy independent if it was not for those really misguided policies that have been done over the last year. You look to see about inflation. It's a huge problem, and it's much higher than 7 or 7.5% when you look at things that really matter. Gas is much higher. Food is higher than 7% up. You look at construction costs, building homes and all this, a huge increase in materials to be able to do that. And the question is why is that? Well, one thing that's facilitated it is they've printed trillions and trillions of dollars. And the solution, we're told, is to print trillions and trillions more? No, that will exacerbate the problem. You look at some of the problems with the supply chain. We have these ships sitting there. You have restrictions that have been imposed over the last year or two that have stopped. We in Florida have been part of the solution. We're going to have a great announcement today. We'll come out and we'll probably do something publicly about it sometime this week, where we're bringing companies from the Long Beach port to Florida. We've had an increase in container ships coming into Florida ports because we said we're open. We have capacity. We want to do it. That's why we're working on things like more commercial driver's license, so we have more truck drivers. So you got to get the goods somewhere when you do it. So we've worked to be part of the solution on inflation, but printing trillions of dollars is fueling inflation. It will not cure inflation. And so it was very, I think, frustrating to hear that a problem that was fueled by those policies, that the solution is to do more of the reckless spending. You look at the border. He said we want a secure border. Well, he's the one that opened the border. Are you kidding me? If you look at the increase in people that have come illegally, you had 2 million people come illegally from over 100 different countries over the last year. Communities, particularly rural communities, are having to deal with the increase in methamphetamine, increase in fentanyl. The cartels are basically eating our lunch. That was all as a result of the policy choices that were made upon him becoming president. He mentioned reducing the cost of prescription drugs. Florida has had an application on the federal government's desk for over a year to let us buy the drugs from Canada. We legislated this a couple years ago. We've gone through this Byzantine process, and we've basically sat, and the federal government has done nothing. If they just signed on the dotted line, we actually have warehouse ready. We would start bringing it in. We have the labeling ready, and we would be able to save tens of millions of dollars just for the state of Florida for our drug costs. So yes, lower drug, but you have the opportunity to do some of these things. He says with crime, because crime is totally out of control in many parts of the country, that they don't want to defund, they want to fund police. Well, many of these cities have defunded police or cut police budgets over the last year, year and a half, and that's why you see crime skyrocketing. You have prosecutors that won't prosecute cases. They just let people get away with crime. Of course that's going to breed lawlessness. And the Biden White House, to this day, still supports eliminating cash bail. Well, that's one of the reasons why you've seen crime go off the hook in places like New York, because they put these people right back on the street, and then they end up committing serious criminal offenses. And so, yeah, there's a lot of problems. It just seems to me that most of these problems are of Joe Biden's own creation. And with that, I'll take some questions. Yes, ma'am.
This morning, I just got off the phone with his mother, Kathy Lewis. Since 2017, her 25-year-old daughter has required care 24 hours a day. She is at home now. She's not in a facility. But now the state wants to cut that care by 8 hours. She's not sure why this is happening.
Is that legislation you're talking about?
She just got a letter from the Agency for Persons with Disabilities.
Can you show me the letter so we can look at it?
The letter, but yeah. What would you tell this mother?
Well, I want to see it. I mean, what happens is, if there's a bureaucratic issue, we want to come in and try to help people out. And so if you get that to us, we will absolutely work. I know the legislature is working on different things. We've had issues. I mean, there's been a huge increase in Medicaid, of course, but the reimbursements are low, so those are going to go up because it's harder to get people, and folks need care. So you're going to see, I think, some issues with the legislature in terms of that. But that particular case, if you get us that, I will talk to the agency and we'll see what we can do.
The abortion ban bill is on the floor of the Senate today. I spoke with Senate President Walton Simpson over the summer. He's a big supporter of this $8 million for a long-acting contraception program. A lot of health experts and doctors feel like that's the best way to cut down on abortions is by reducing unwanted pregnancies. I'm wondering if you agree with that approach and if you plan to veto that program as you did last year.
I don't recall that, to be honest with you, so I'd have to look and see and get back to you.
In terms of the State of the Union, I know you said you fell asleep before it ended, but is there any parts of it you did agree with that you heard?
I mean, I think I'd have to think about some of the stuff. Well, I mean, I agree. If you think about what they've done, Fauci is in the witness protection program now. They don't want him out. They've never supported any. If you listen to them, they never supported all these policies that were so destructive. Now it's like, we all want to be like Florida all of a sudden, and nothing has changed. There's been no change in the underlying science. The ineffectiveness of those policies was apparent long ago. The destructiveness of those policies was apparent long ago. And they were the ones that were dipping their nose into Florida's business last summer, saying that 2-year-old kids needed to be forced masked when they leave the house, saying that school children had to wear masks for 8 hours a day. Now they act like that was something they didn't support, and they're saying that you don't do it. They actually said 2 weeks ago that everyone at the speech had to have an N95 mask. Then they changed it. How did the science change in 2 weeks? It changed. It didn't change. They changed that because they knew it would be a terrible visual to have all these people there suffering in mass, socially distant, while the rest of the country is out living their lives. And so I'm glad that I think it was because of politics. I don't think this was a legitimate conversion. I think they're getting negative polling, and I think most Americans associate these never-ending restrictions with their administration and like-minded governors and mayors. And it's interesting because for every governor or mayor that takes restrictive action, mandate, lockdown, almost all say, critical of Florida. How many of them end up on vacation in Florida over the last year, year and a half? And there's a lot that many of you know, but I can tell you there's even more that haven't been made public because people tell me these things because, they work at like a, resort, and they're like, wait a minute, if I was working in their state, I'd have been shut down, and yet they come down here and they're enjoying all this stuff. So I'm glad that they have pivoted off of it. I think it's been really damaging, and I think you're going to continue to see problems with what we're seeing with some of the school children, how they were treated in a lot of these different parts of the country. I mean, can you imagine, like, you're in Chicago or Los Angeles or some of these places, and you can't get your kid in school for the entire year last year? Or you'd go in one day a week, and then forget about all the mitigation once you're in school. But that is a huge, huge thing. That's going to have huge ramifications far into the future, and they were responsible for doing that. We stood up for kids in Florida. We stood up for parents. We stood up for education because we thought it was important, and I think our kids are going to be much better off than a lot of these kids in these other states. And even to that day last night, you have them saying no masks in the Capitol, which I support, but then they're still forcing kids in elementary school in certain parts of the country to do this. And so I'm glad that the conversion has happened. I don't think it's necessarily genuine. I think it's more driven by political science. But here's, I think, the stakes for just people in Florida and throughout the country. Once we get through that midterm election, I think people that are of that mindset will probably look to clamp down again. And so the only way you could be sure that your freedoms are going to be respected is to make sure that you're supporting people who have demonstrated a record of actually supporting your freedoms. Yes, sir.
Could you address the crisis in Ukraine and how the president is handling it, and is there anything you would do differently if you were in charge?
Well, I said the other day that if you look at what's going on in someone like Vladimir Putin, I analogize him to basically an authoritarian gas station attendant. If you look at their country, it's a hollowed out country, but for the energy. And yes, they have legacy nuclear weapons, which makes them much more dangerous than if they didn't have those. And so he's in a situation where his ideology, I think, is try to reassemble some of the lost glory of what they had. Now, the Soviet Union was not a glorious entity. I mean, this was one of the most evil regimes in modern history, and the result was a lot of deaths because of Soviet communism and Chinese communism in the 20th century. But his view is that the dissolution of the Soviet Union was a bad thing, and so he's being fueled because America's not serious about energy independence right now, and Europe is not serious at all. So Europe is funding this guy, so he has the ability now to go in and flex muscle. When I was in Congress under President Trump, we funded a lot of weapons for Ukraine to be able to defend themselves. I think that has helped them put up a fight. I think that they've done better than a lot of people thought. Nevertheless, they're putting a lot of machinery, a lot of heavy equipment inside that country. That's going to be very difficult, for Ukraine to keep at bay indefinitely. However, what I think is going to end up happening is you're going to end up with like these Ukrainians engaging in guerrilla warfare, and I think it's going to be like death by 1,000 cuts. And so I think Putin is miscalculated. But if you want to hold Putin accountable, the way to do it is hit him where it hurts, hit him with the energy. But in order to do that, America, we would need to reverse the policies that Biden's put in place. We'd have to get Keystone back online. We'd have to do ANWR. We'd have to do production on federal lands. That will then get us to where we were, where we could be independent of Russian oil and be able to have a lot of leverage to use against them in this. But if you're not willing to do that, I mean, some of these sanctions, maybe they'll have an impact. We'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. I think a lot of the international opinion has really gone against Putin in ways that he didn't quite anticipate. So it may have an impact. But if you hit him on energy, that would be a crippling blow, and those oligarchs wouldn't like it. And Putin, he's propped up by the oligarchs. And so if the oligarchs lose confidence in him, then he would really be, I think, in a very difficult situation. But at the end of the day, this is a guy that is very aggressive, and I believe that the decision to go into Ukraine was one that was probably made last summer as he's watching what was happening in Afghanistan and the failed American, how Biden handled that. I think he sized that up. I think President Xi in China is sizing that up. I think the Ayatollah in Iran is sizing that up. And so I said you're going to have a lot of turmoil over the next 3.5 years, and unfortunately that's being proven correct. But hitting him where it hurts is really what you need to do to be able to really show that this was a big error in judgment. I think he miscalculated anyways. I don't think this is going to work out for him the way that he wanted to. And, when you see people that are willing to fight, I mean, it's inspiring to see these people just grab rifles who are civilians and going out there and fighting to ward off a Russian army. A lot of other places around the world, they just fold the minute there's any type of adversity. I mean, can you imagine if he went into France? Would they do anything to put up a fight? Probably not. And so those folks, are stepping up. But there's a lot of problems, I think, between now and then. And I think, unfortunately, it's going to end up very, very ugly over the next weeks and months. Okay, thank you, guys. Appreciate it.